Hey, it's Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. And we've been going through the U.S. History Review. And one of the things that we wanted to do, of course, is kind of follow up when we're talking about World War II. Now, we looked at some of the highlights, gave you some of the facts that you have to master when it comes to World War II. And that will be standard number 7 from Mississippi Department of Education's list of standards for U.S. history. But now we also want to go through and take you through some of the test items. Now, the test items, of course, that relate to that objective, of course, and support, what we need you to know when it comes to the map assessment, when it comes to WW2. Now, in looking at that, World War II Standard 7 says World War II examine the nation's role in World War II and the impact on domestic and international affairs. So not only what the impact, of course, was here at home, but what the impact, of course, was overseas. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started by looking at some of those test items that have been retired, but now, once again, even though they've been retired, the test items change a little bit, but for the most part, the same ideas are what's incorporated in those new test items. World War II Assessment Standard 7. This official U.S. Navy photograph shows the USS Arizona on fire after having been hit by a bomb on December 7, 1941. It's a day that lives in infamy, according to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that would be the attack on Pearl Harbor. How did the event shown in the photograph lead to a change in U.S. foreign policy at the time? The attack on Pearl Harbor forced the United States out of an isolationist foreign policy. I shouldn't have to go any further, should I? Because if you know that December 7th, 1941 is Pearl Harbor, and you should know that because we know that that's in the fact list, the best answer is probably going to be A. But don't do what Coach Anderson just did. Make sure you go through and look at all the answers, because when you look at it, it could, Pearl Harbor's mentioned here, but it says forced the United States into a policy of neutrality. We came out of neutrality and started involved in the war. So make sure that you look at all of the answer choices and don't just do what I did, because sometimes it gets you in trouble now. But if you know your facts, you'll be all right. During World War II, Americans could purchase war bonds with a face value that was greater than the purchase price. For example, a war bond purchased for $18.75 or $18.75 would be worth $25 in 10 years. Why did the U.S. government offer Americans the opportunity to purchase war bonds during World War II? Well, I know, based on my fact list, that war bonds were used to finance World War II. War bonds helped finance the war effort and were also an investment in one's own financial future. War bonds could be used to purchase greater quality of products that were rationed in the war. It didn't have anything to do with that. War bonds eliminated the need to use price controls to help stabilize the cost of products in the wartime economy. Nope. There were price controls, but war bonds had nothing to do with that. War bonds could be used to purchase automobiles. No. Best answer, once again, is A. And once again, it's easy to get these if you have a basic understanding of when things happen. 1930s, of course, would be the Depression. 1920s, the Roaring '20s. New Deal will be the latter part of the 1930s. And, even the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. And if you can kind of get a grasp on that, when things are happening, what some of the basic facts are, you can answer any of these questions. What was the significance of 1944 Korematsu v. United States Supreme Court case? The court supported the right of the United States to deport Japanese Americans during World War II. The court found that the detention of Japanese Americans during World War II was a military necessity. The court found that the detention of Japanese Americans during World War II amounted to racial discrimination. The court supported the right of Japanese Americans to refuse forced relocation to a detention center during World War II. Well, what Korematsu did is basically, during World War II, once again, this is directly from your fact list, not directly, it's from the fact list, but it doesn't say specifically what you hear here. But what it basically does is during World War II, the Japanese, of course, were interned in these detention centers away from the West Coast for fear that they would help the Japanese if the Japanese sought to invade the West Coast of the United States of America. The best answer was B. The court found that the detention of Japanese Americans in World War II was a military necessity. Now, we're going to find out a little bit later, of course, that Japanese, of course, will get restitution for having to sell their homes and give up their homes, of course, to go to these camps. This excerpt is from a resolution drafted during the United Nations Genocide Convention. The resolution was adopted unanimously by the General Assembly of the United Nations, of which the United States is a member nation. On December 8, 1948, Article 1, the contracting parties confirmed that genocide, or the destruction or the killing of a murder of a race, whether committed in a time of peace or wartime, is a crime under international law which they undertake to prevent and to punish. Article 6, persons charged with genocide shall be tried by a competent tribunal of the state in the territory of which the act was committed, or by such international penal tribunal as may have jurisdiction with respect to those contracting parties which shall have accepted its jurisdiction. In other words, basically what it's saying is that you can't, during times of war or during times of peace, have genocide. Anybody that engages in genocide can be, or any government that engages, or group that engages in genocide can be held accountable. Why did the United States agree to adopt this resolution? To prevent being pulled into another international war? Nope. To avoid being involved in the prosecution of international war criminals? Nope. To avoid being a party to future trials resulting from international conflicts? Nope. To prevent the attempted destruction of a human group from ever happening again. At the end of the day, we don't want another Holocaust. This list includes examples of efforts initiated by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the early 1940s. Alcoa, the aluminum company, manufactured airplanes. Lionel Toy Train Company manufactured items for warships. The Ford Motor Company produced B-24 Liberator bombers. The Metallook manufacturing company, which had made upholstery nails, manufactured cartridge clips for rifles. Which goal did President Roosevelt hope to accomplish through the efforts included in this list? Well, about making weapons, it seems like. Airplanes a weapon, can be used as a weapon. The warships, clips for rifles, those are all war items of war. Bring the nation out of the Great Depression, promote employment of women and minorities, win support for corporations for ending the war, provide military equipment for the United States and its allies. Just be able to read a little bit. World War II Assessment Standard 7. This excerpt comes from the Lend-Lease Act passed March 11, 1941. Which two statements describe consequences of the Lend-Lease Act? The law angered Germany and led to it to invade Poland? Nope. That was after the invasion of Poland. The law led to the United States to firmly commit to neutrality. The law caused the United States to shift away from isolationism. The law removed the power to declare war from the President Roosevelt. The law allowed the United States to loan supplies and weapons to warring nations. Basically, two things. It allowed the United States of America, of course, to get away from isolationism, move toward getting involved in the war. And also what it did is the United States loaning supplies, of course, to warring nations. All right. This excerpt comes from an eyewitness account by Father John A. Symes of an event that occurred on August 6, 1945. As a result of the explosion of the bomb at 8:15, almost the entire city was destroyed at a single blow. Only small outlying districts in the southern and eastern parts of the town escaped complete destruction. The bomb exploded over the center of the city. As a result of the blast, the small Japanese houses in a diameter of 5 kilometers, which composed 99% of the city, collapsed or were blown up. Those who were in the houses were buried in the ruins. Those who were in the open sustained burns resulting from contact with the substance or rays emitted by the bomb. Where the substances struck in quantity, fires sprang up. These spread rapidly. What was one cause of the event described by the excerpt? The devastation brought by the bomb led to Japan's unconditional surrender, because this would be Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The fear of having a similar bomb dropped on Berlin, well, the Germans were already surrendered. That happened May 8th, 1945, so it can't be that. The fear of having a similar bomb dropped on the United States slowed the path to the end of the war. The devastation brought by the bomb increased Japan's determination to defeat the Allied powers. The best answer is going to be A. The excerpt comes from the State of the American People made by President Harry Truman, August 6, 1945. 16 hours ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb in Hiroshima and an important Japanese army base. That bomb had more than the power than 20,000 tons of TNT, and the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. It is an atomic bomb. We are now prepared to obliterate more rapidly and completely every productive enterprise the Japanese have have above ground in any city. We shall destroy their docks, their factories, their communications. Let there be no mistake. We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war. What was President Truman's main goal in ordering the actions described in the excerpt? Well, this, once again, is Hiroshima, the bomb in Hiroshima and the bomb, of course, on Nagasaki, to exact revenge for the Japanese government. Now, he may have wanted revenge, but that wasn't it. To demonstrate the military resources of the United States, that may have been the case. Maybe he wanted to do that. But the main reason why he wanted to do it, the main goal, to save American lives by forcing Japanese surrender. So that doesn't mean that these other things aren't correct, but it says the important part is main goal. This photograph was taken July 1942 at the Willow Run bomber plant. How did the role of women like the one shown in the photograph change during World War II? They took over traditionally male manufacturing jobs while the men were at war. They aided the war effort by taking on leadership roles in factories and shipyards. They aided the war effort by planting victory gardens and training with the Red Cross. Well, she ain't planting no garden over there. They took over traditionally male jobs in the National Guard while the men were at work. The best answer is A. Women and minorities fill the gap. Hence the idea of Rosie the Riveter. You know, she worked, of course, because the men were overseas, and she supported the war effort by doing what she could to work in those factories. The summary describes a World War II military strategy, an offensive military strategy of coordinated land, sea, and air forces conducted against hostile shores, such as during the D-Day invasion. Well, on that overview, one of the things that we said is that it was not blitzkrieg, it wasn't a blockade, it wasn't island hopping, it was an amphibious landing. And that's the best answer. The excerpt comes from Selective Training and Service Act of 1940. Selective Service Training Act has to do with the draft. So let's see if we can answer that without having to even read this. So we know it's the draft. It says, what impact did this law have on the demographics of the United States labor force during World War II? More women and minorities were employed in heavy industry jobs. Most American Indians left the traditional economies to work in factories. Unskilled workers became unemployed with the introduction of automation. We know that can't be the case. Reduced availability of factory, no, there are gonna be more jobs. So we have to determine between A and B. More women and minorities were employed in heavy industry jobs. Most American Indians, come on now. Best answer. And that's not even having read the excerpt. This list describes an important person in the history of the United States. Led the Allied invasion of North Africa, led the invasion of France, named the Supreme Allied Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. Which person is described in this list? Once again, straight from your fact list, best answer. He also becomes President of the United States of America in 1952, and Dwight David Eisenhower, General Dwight David Eisenhower. Once again, some of the questions, of course, won't be multiple choice. Sometimes what we have to do is match by drawing a line. So, and we've done one of these before. General George S. Patton, Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, President Franklin Roosevelt. The easiest way for me to do this is I just go to the right over here and look and see who did what. Well, I know that Truman was a president and Roosevelt was a president, okay? All right, it says, became Commander-in-Chief April 12, 1945, made the decision to drop the atomic bomb. Well, I know that's Truman. All right, was a tank commander in the European theater and was very successful at rapid deployment tactics. Patton. Was commander of Allied forces. Prepared the nation for war by supporting programs like Lend-Lease. This excerpt describes the lives of Japanese Americans during World War II. It comes from an article, Library of Congress website. I know that they were removed through internment. Which justification did the U.S. government give the action described in the excerpt? The actions were taken to identify potential soldiers. The actions were taken to increase population in rural areas. The actions were taken to ensure national security of the country. The actions were taken to identify potential workers. That was about Japanese internment, getting them off the West Coast, moving to the interior of the country, so that in case if they had any sentiment to help the Japanese if the Japanese attempted to invade the West Coast, that they wouldn't have the opportunity to help, which most of them were second generation or third generation American and had very little ties to Japan. What we hope to do, of course, is to give you some ideas about some of the test items that you'll see when it comes to, lesson 8, World War II, and then standard, I think, number 7. So what we try to do is give you some of the retired test items that MAP, has put out there and that have been on state tests before. And once again, what it requires is you be able to read, of course, with some discernment. It also requires that you have a pretty good working knowledge of the facts. And once again, I keep telling you, the best way to do well on this test is have a good working knowledge of what the facts are. Because even if you don't know a specific answer, what you can do is reason your way through it. And by eliminating what you know can't be the answer based on time, the time frame, or based on some other information that you may have. This is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. Keep in mind now, this test is very important because what it does, once again, it is the great gateway to you becoming a senior. And if you don't want all that stress of having to pass the U.S. history test as a senior, you want to go ahead and take care of that nonsense before as an 11th grader. And with that, we'll see you next time.